quality. Quality will always outlast quantity. Because one of the biggest life lessons for me when I got really into the just prior to the junk wax area was I wanted to collect everything. So I was collecting NBA, MLB, NHL, NFL. And when you're a young collector, and if you don't have deep pockets and your mom and dad's not going to give you your allowance to buy those cards, you can't afford all four sports. That is one of the biggest lessons I learned. You need to focus on one sport, maybe two. Don't go crazy and try and collect every sport.
I have with me now Mr. Kent Wong, the king of sports cards, at least in my world. How's your day going so far?
Good, Ben. Good, Ben. Thank you for having me on your show. I feel a lot of pressure here because I don't know if I could compete with like the likes of Ariana Fox or the Venkat sisters.
Yeah, I mean they're great, but I love everything you do with sports cards. It's something I've been really, you could, say I've been really getting on this recently. You've been there a lot to help me out, exploring this world, making some hopefully good picks. So I'm excited to share all the knowledge that you shared with me to everyone else.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
First of all, can you kind of give me a briefer on the history of a sports card? Because they weren't always this thing that you flip, you make money. They were something that you had fun with, right?
Yeah, so for my generation, monetary value in terms of sports cards was very little. For us, it was more about when we bought packs, we weren't necessarily looking to flip or make money. For us back in the day when we bought cards at the corner store or at the supermarket, because they just came in little, as they say, wax packs, because it was like a wax wrapper. Um, we'd try and save up our money. It'd be like $1, 50 cents, whatever for a pack. And at those days, we were just trying to build the set because it was more like being a completionist to try and complete a set versus, oh, look, that's a great Wayne Gretzky rookie. I'm going to buy lots of those and, focus on just trying to collect Wayne Gretzky. That wasn't the case for us. A lot of times it was just set building, collecting who we liked, collecting our favorite hockey players that we idolized. That's basically what it was.
Why did they kind of introduce sports cards in the first place?
Um, I don't know if I'm the residential expert for that, but I can tell you that another one of our guests, Bobby Burrell, who's a great historian when it comes to hockey cards and the history of cards itself. So essentially, how it all started was it was a good tool to market, for example, like a candy bar or a loaf of bread back in the day to try and get people to, as an incentive, to buy their products. And that's basically how it started. Because if you think about one of the most famous cards out there, which is the Jonas Wagner T206, that was a card that was found in tobacco. So it was another one of those things that just add an extra layer of, kind of like a uh, kind of like a lure to get you to buy a particular product. So it was like an extra incentive. That's how it was.
So I know sports cards were really mainstream, like 1970 to 1990s when the kind of junk wax era happened. What is that junk wax?
70s was in junk wax.
The 90s junk wax. Yeah.
1990s, yeah, 1990s into the early 2000s was junk wax. So what happened was, for the four leagues, the four major leagues, which would be MLB, NFL, NBA, and to a certain extent NHL, they had multiple licenses to different companies. So at those times, well, I would have to include the ones that are defunct now, which is like Leaf, Fleer. Those were all involved with making sports cards, and mainly to a certain extent, NFL, NBA, and MLB were probably the main ones. Um, because there were so many licenses out there, it was just massive overproduction, and that's kind of why it's considered the junk wax era. There's just too much of it out there. Like today, you can still find at garage sales or flea markets like Score. Um, and unfortunately, unless you can get a really pristine copy of a particular rookie card in Score, the majority of the cards in Score, and I'm not putting down Score by any means, but I'm just using it as an example. Um, there's just tons of it out there. I still hear people finding boxes on open score at like flea markets and garage sales. It's incredible how much of the stuff was printed.
I, from personal experience, bought a few giant boxes of sports cards at a garage sale like a month ago because I listened to Gary Vee, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and he was talking all about sports cards, and I was at a garage sale, and this guy had like 5 boxes of sports cards like for $100, and I thought that was an amazing deal. Only to realize kind of after the research that they were all basically kind of trash. Um, so the junk wax era kind of happened after 1990s, and then there wasn't really too much about sports cards. It kind of happened during the 2000s, 2010s, right?
So what happened there was the ML, well, the four main sports licenses, they started doing what they were called exclusive licenses. So basically, I'll just use Upper Deck for example. They've had the hockey license for quite a while now, but that's the only license that they have. They started these four major sports markets started to get wise on it, and what they did was they did these exclusive license deals. So Tops for the longest time had baseball, Panini had NBA and football, like NFL. So and then the other players like Upper Deck couldn't do football and they couldn't do NBA, and then Tops couldn't do hockey and they couldn't do like NFL. So you had they really tightened the reins on it. Now some would argue, that creates a bit of a monopoly. Kind of waters down the product. You have the same company making the same product year after year, who's because they're holding a monopoly on that one particular sport, who's going to be like doing quality control on them because you know they can just print and do as many as they want, and nobody's going to say anything because they don't have they don't have a competitor.
So yeah, that must be interesting. So the quality really just kind of went away, and there wasn't much interest in it. But then all of a sudden, recently, in the past 2 3 years, it's like a huge boom for sports cards. They're like up what 1,000%. It's crazy. What made that boom happen?
Well, there's a couple of interesting factors that made that boom happen. Um, we had some generational talent show up. And what I mean by generational talent, I'll talk about like the Sidney Crosbys, the Connor McDavids in hockey. In baseball, you have Mike Trout, a few other higher end guys comparatively to Mike Trout. And then in the NBA, you had the new crop of kids, which I say kids, but they're really good players like Luka Doncic, Trey Young, just to name a few, Giannis. Um, and in the NFL, you had all these young up and coming guys too, as well, right? So people got wise to that, and also what factored into it as well is the whole, oh well, these guys are really good. Maybe we should stock up on the rookies. And the print runs weren't as greatly overly produced like they were in the junk wax area. So you have low supply, big name talent, people following the big name talent and realizing that if I invest or buy a lot of these particular rookies, then they'll appreciate in value. And I don't think 3 or 4 years ago, people might argue this with me, but 3 or 4 years ago, I don't think a lot of people were thinking that I'm going to load up on these particular people so I can flip them to make extra money. Uh, but in a roundabout weird way, the whole COVID-19 pandemic created a situation where everybody stayed at home. People of my generation wouldn't be going out to the restaurant spending money. They wouldn't be going to bars or even because there was no sports playing in 2020, or at least not many. So there was no gambling per se. So you had all these people sitting at home twiddling their thumbs, and then they're like, "Oh well, I can rifle through my cards that I put aside for like forever and see what happens." And people started digging through their stuff and realized, oh, I have rookies of this particular guy or this other person. Oh, this could potentially be of value. And because of the whole pandemic situation, it caused grading card companies to get overwhelmed. They couldn't handle the amount of cards that were coming in because everybody and their family were digging through their boxes of old cards and sending in rookie cards just to get it graded. and that created another boom in itself. And we're still in the midst of the boom, I would say, although some might argue that we're heading towards the end of the boom. I will tell you this: I don't think we're ever going to hit the end of the boom because there's too much up and coming talent. The four major sports are still valid to everybody's psyche. Now that, more so in the United States than it is in Canada, where I am, majority of the stadiums in the United States have full capacity now. So I just don't see the boom going away. It may modulate a little bit, but I don't think it's going to stop.
We've already talked about, how sports cards came as a promotional thing, as a way to sell cigarettes and a way to sell bread, and then how it, yep, all those things. And then it became the junk wax era where, yeah, people like this, so we're going to make a million of them. And then you have the monopolies where they just kind of didn't care really about the consumers. And then now, in this huge boom, where do you fit in? When did you get kind of really involved in this sports card world?
I've never really been away from the sports card world. So when I was a kid, um, and this is going back in the 80s, when it wasn't quite the junk wax era yet, I was like anybody else. I was collecting cards for the sake because I liked the players. I thought Mark Messier was like an awesome power forward in hockey. And I'm sorry, I'm using sorry for the folks in the United States. I'm using hockey references, but because I grew up in Canada, so hockey's my main thing. But I did like, for example, one of my favorite teams when I was a kid growing up was like the Baltimore Orioles. So I was following like Cal Ripken because I thought he was an awesome shortstop, awesome ball player, which he is. Um, so I was kind of following my favorite teams, the players on those favorite teams, you know, and that was the main thing for me growing up. And it just kind of didn't really stop for me. I kept buying as many cards as I could possibly do. I remember one year I was so into baseball. I think it was 1984 or 83. I was visiting my relatives in Ottawa, and I made my poor uncle drive me to all these convenience stores looking for these baseball packs. But he did it for me. But we were looking everywhere for these baseball packs, right? So so it was more for me as a set completionist than anything else. But then I went away to school, got into really athletics while I was in school, like when I was school college. So I kind of stopped a little bit, like a lot of other people in my age bracket. I took a little bit of time off. I was really into sports and girls, unfortunately. Maybe that was a bad thing, good thing. But I had other things that were distracting me from cards, and that was okay because for me that was kind of like the junk wax era anyway. But then as I got into a real job and started working in the corporate world, and like any other adult that listens to this podcast, you start making more money. You start earning more money. You kind of get back into the old habits of like, oh, I've missed out on cards for 4 or 5 or 6 years. What's happening lately? And then for me, it was just the novelty of you know opening a box or opening a pack, seeing who you're gonna get, and that kind of drew me back into it again. And to this day, and we can talk about this later, but my partner on our own podcast, same thing for him. Uh, we've never really stopped collecting since. As an adult, we're still, gung ho collectors, I would say.
Just a quick fun question. In all your life with sports cards before this huge boom in 2018, 17, 19, what's a card that you opened that you just kind of like tossed to the side that turned out to be worth quite a bit of money now that you just kind of tossed off?
Yeah, I have a bad story about that. So, um, it was 2001. Uh, there was two main rookies in 2001. It was Ichiro Suzuki and some guy named Albert Pujols. For me, I was trying to get Ichiro Suzuki uniquely because one, he was like one of the more successful Asian players to come over to the North American market, and he ended up on Seattle with Seattle Mariners, as everybody knows. Um, and he was highly hyped, and it turned out he was like a Hall of Fame player in the MLB. But I kept pulling this guy named Albert Pujols, I kept getting Albert Pujols. I wasn't getting any Ichiro rookies. I kept getting Albert Pujols. And I'll have to tell you, anybody who's listening to this, what Albert Pujols has done over his career, because he's another Hall of Famer. But I had so many Albert Pujols rookies, and I had 2 or 3 Albert Pujols rookie autos that I unloaded for like nothing because I was trying to get Ichiro Suzuki. Now, if I, thinking back to that now today, if I had those Albert Pujols, I'd be doing pretty good. So that's a perfect example of me trying to being too focused on one guy and not realizing that the other guy that I kept getting had major potential.
If all those cards that you got came back in PSA 10, we'll explain what that means. PSA 10. If all of them came back though in PSA 10s, how much would that be worth?
Oh, gee. Um, I think a PSA 10 Albert Pujols Bowman Ricky Auto, which I had 3 of them, if they all come back PSA 10, they'd probably be around 4 to 5 thousand US dollars each.
So now during this conversation, I'm sure that a lot of you guys listening are a bit confused at the terminology we're using. And before you go listen to this and do your own thing with sports cards, make sure to do the research. I'm sure Kent, you would agree with me about doing the research. But to kind of summarize the main key terms, what's a rookie card? Who are the main card companies? What's grading? Uh, can you kind of simplify a few of those concepts?
So the rookie. Okay, I'll start off with the rookie card first. So the rookie card is the first year a particular player shows up on a trading card. Now, there's a little bit of a you know quasi what is really considered a true rookie. Is it his first prospect card, or is it his first card with has the rookie card symbol on it? Some people would argue it's their first prospect card, but for me to be a true rookie card, I would say would have to have the rookie card logo because then that is the first official card or day that he actually stepped foot in the major leagues. Now, others would argue that the first prospect card would be considered as a rookie card. True, but to me that will always be a prospect card. So that's one. Sorry, Ben. What were the other questions?
So after rookie card, what are the major card companies right now?
Okay, so right now, today, there's uh, 4 major card companies. It's Topps, who takes care of baseball. You have Panini that kind of takes care of NBA and football, and then you have Upper Deck, who looks after hockey, NHL. And then there's another one. It's Leaf. I don't want to leave Leaf out. Leaf is kind of like a kind of on the sidelines card company that actually has value in terms of prospects under the Leaf brand. So they will do prospects of like NFL. Um, I can't remember if it's NBA, but MLB for sure. They'll do some soccer. They'll do some entertainment. So I don't want to leave Leaf out, but they do have a play in everything in all of this.
The rookie card, the first card, the most valuable by far. Now we know the major four companies. What about grading? Why is this card in a slab? What does that mean? What's a PSA 9, PSA 10?
So grading has been around for a while. Now, grading didn't really take off until I would say probably definitely the pandemic took off during the pandemic for sure. So basically, grading is essentially taking a card, and they do this with comic books as well and other things, even video game cartridges to a certain extent, from what I know. But essentially, what you're taking is a card that you feel that has potential to be in a pristine condition. So what you want to do is when you send it off to a grading company like Beckett, PSA, or SGC, they'll give an overall grade based on their authenticating team. They'll look it over. They'll make sure there's no dings, no scratches on the surface because edges, corners, surface. Sometimes even the legibility of an autograph comes into play. So what they'll do is they'll look the card over, and if they feel that the card is in pristine condition, in this case, uh, for PSA, it would be PSA 10 Gem Mint. For Beckett, it would be pristine gold, and then there's pristine black. I can get into the difference now or later about the two differences into pristine with BGS if you want. Um, so basically, it comes from the grade. So for PSA, it's like grades of 10, 9, 8.5, 8, 7, 6, 5, and all the numbers down. So the lower the number, the worse the condition of the card is. Now for BGS, it comes in pristine black 10, pristine 10 gold, and then you have Gem Mint 9, and then it goes from 9, sorry, Gem Mint 9.5, my bad. And then 9, and then 8, 7, 6, and all these other subgrades.
What are we looking at in terms of a kid out there who wants to use sports cards as, of course, a way to have fun, but also as an investment? Is there a huge difference between a PSA 9 and PSA 10 in terms of value?
Yes, so, well, okay, I'll use PSA for example. Um, so there's a huge difference between a PSA 10 and a PSA 9 because in a collector's mind, or even today, unfortunately, I would say investor's mind, for them that means like that's the most pristine condition that the card is in, and that's also the highest grade you can get in PSA, which is Gem Mint 10. And then when you go to 9, that means like it's a Mint 9. Mint is not bad, but to them in their mind, it's not pristine. That's the difference. So when it comes to markers like that, people pay a certain amount for a Mint 9, but the really big players, when I say big players, the people that have a lot of money, they want the most pristine copy they can get. So they'll pay the money to get a Gem Mint 10.
That makes sense. Yeah, so yeah, and I mean, a personal experience, a new sports card person, with not a ton of money. I know there's a huge difference in a PSA 9 and PSA 10. It's like $20 to $200. So when a new kid who's listening to the podcast, they like sports, they watch it pretty often, and now they're like, wait, I can actually make money from having a good intuition about sports, which players are going to do well, which teams are going to do well. What's the first step you would recommend they take in kind of pursuing sports cards as a fun thing to do, of course, but then also as kind of a way, not necessarily betting and gambling, but a flipping investment thing too?
I would say for young listeners on your podcast, collect what you like. Don't go collecting thinking that you're going to be flipping cards. Because if you go into collecting flipping cards, you really need to know what you're doing. I'm not saying that people out there don't, but it's one of those skills that you really need to learn first. It's not something that you can just acquire off the street and say, I want to be a flipper. Um, because for your listeners, I would encourage them to collect what you like. And if it turns out that particular team or a particular player that you like ends up being really, really good, and that's where you're going to be have the ability to get those cards graded, and then depending on how they pan out throughout the years, then you can probably look at flipping. Now, I'm not saying that everybody isn't knowledgeable when it comes to sports, especially kids of your generation, because I find that even when I set up at card shows, I can't tell you how many kids walk up to my booth and try to make deals with me, and they're very knowledgeable. So I'm not for the uninitiated though. Really look at who your favorite players are. Doesn't matter which sport. It could be MLB, NBA, whatever. Like the sport, like the player. Don't go looking to say. Let's say you're new and you say, "Oh well, Giannis won the NBA title last year. I'm gonna put all my money into Giannis." Well, here's the mistake. He's already 5 or 6 years in the league, so you can't buy his rookie cards now anyway. Because I'm not saying you couldn't. I don't know what your family situation is, but his rookie card is not cheap, right? So plus he won the NBA championship last year, so it's definitely not cheap now. That'd be the biggest mistake. I would say for anybody who's willing to get into it now, the uninitiated, look at prospects that are going to be coming up into your favorite sport, because that way if you start following a particular player as a prospect and they pan out in that particular field of sport, whatever it is that they play in, That's when you can realize that, oh, I lucked out because I followed this particular person. He ended up being really, really good. And I didn't pay a whole lot of money to get into that particular card of that person because I started off with his prospect and his rookie cards first. Yeah. Does that make sense, Ben?
And that's why I've always heard with everything, whether it's sports cards or comic books or sneakers, to just always invest in what you or buy and also collect, invest what you like first. And you can't really lose, even if the player turns out to be terrible. You still have your favorite player up on a shelf, right? When kids are going in this new digital age, right? It's a lot different from when you were a kid and you could go to the store. Like right now, can't you not even go to the store and buy a junk wax box or not junk wax? You can't even buy a sealed box, right? Like it's so in demand. So how do kids now go about buying their favorite players? How does it work, on eBay, on sites like ComC?
Okay, so ComSys is slightly different from eBay. So eBay is basically a flipper's market. So I hate to say it, unfortunately, but and you can probably Google it for those that are listening or watching. But there, this especially during the pandemic year, you've got, I hate to say it, but adults cleaning out the shelves at a Target or a Walmart, and then taking those boxes that majority of the public can't even get because you cleaned out the shelf, and they're flipping it for more money on eBay, and they're just trying to make a buck, and they're trying to let me rephrase that. They're not trying to make a buck. They are making a buck because they're taking advantage of the fact that there's this big boom happening right now in the sports card world, right? Um, so unfortunately, there's that ugly side of it. So right now, if you live in a city or a town that doesn't have a hobby store, and again, the hobby stores are, I hate to say it, they're kind of getting scarce these days. If you don't have a local hobby shop to go to, then the real choice you have is either Target and the WalMarts. But if these adults are cleaning out the Targets and WalMarts, that only leaves you with eBay and ComC. Now, ComC is more of a site that people will put their cards up on that site, and it's more about singles. So if you're looking for a particular player or a favorite person, then ComC is definitely your best bet for that. But in terms of buying wax in order to rip packs, it gets a little tough in that regard. So the only thing you can do right now is really go to a reputable uh, hobby online hobby store. And there's lots out there. You can just Google it in your own city, town. Uh, you should be able to find some. I don't want to name one in particular because I don't want to give any particular affiliation to any particular brand. But there are big name hobby shop stores online that you can Google and try and get cards that way. A lot of times, um, they do have sales, so you can find wax on those storefronts that are online. That's kind of what I've been doing the last couple of pandemic years. Because one, I didn't feel like going out to a Walmart or well, no Targets in Canada, but I didn't feel like trying to duke it out in a Walmart with other adults fighting over junk wax in the middle of a pandemic, which is probably not a good idea. Um, so we do have local hobby stores in the Toronto market that I can actually order online from. But again, um, you're also dealing with other people that are trying to do the same thing as you. So uh, it's kind of unfortunately taken away from kids a little bit with the whole nonsense with Target and Walmart, unfortunately.
Something came up in my mind a little bit about the boom that's happening right now. I'm sure you've heard about what Gary Vee has kind of done for the sports card world. Um, I guess could you summarize what did he do first of all for everyone out there? Is it good for the collectors out there?
Okay, so Gary Vee is a very well known social influencer, and for those that don't know, he has a YouTube channel. He has a lot of social media channels, and he's also been investing in a bunch of different things. I think he has his own wine as well. But then, same thing with Gary Vee. Gary Vee is not much older than me, and he kind of got back into cards again. And because he's a huge social influencer, He started putting out on social media and even on YouTube and being interviewed that he was buying these particular cards of these certain players. And one would argue that he's artificially inflating the market on a particular card or a particular sport of cards. That's to be argued, I guess. Um, but when you have millions of followers, what you say says a lot because you can't just say to for example, I'll say to you, Ben, for example, um, I'll put it up there on Twitter that yep, today I'm buying all the Mike Trout rookies, and then you're gonna say why, then you explain it. So then when you have millions of followers, they're like, oh well, Gary Vee's gonna buy all these Mike Trout rookies. I better do the same thing because Gary Vee is lovingly followed and he makes a lot of money, so he can't be wrong, right? Which is sometimes kind of dangerous. And I'm not knocking Gary Vee because Gary Vee has a very big passion for sports cards, but I guess with great power is like this, the old cliche. With great power comes great responsibility. So you having so many millions of followers, are you actually telling people what you really like and what you're collecting, or are you artificially telling somebody that I think that this particular card is good? So are you kind of like saying, casting a stone in the pond to say that, oh well, maybe the rest of my followers do the same thing, and then they'll drive the value of this particular card that I'm heavily interested in or invested in will go up. Those are different points to look at. um, but he has a big influence. Nobody can say that Gary Vee doesn't have a big influence because once Gary Vee started talking about particular, I can't remember which particular one, but even that caught my interest that he was talking about sports cards. He still continues to this day to talk about the passion that he has for sports cards. I honestly can't say one way or the other, but for me personally, I feel my gut feeling tells me that he's more of a collector than he is trying to artificially inflate a particular player or particular set.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, full disclosure, Gary Vee was kind of what got me interested in sports cards, right? And all his content. And we talked in the very beginning about the different eras of sports cards, how it's changed over time. There's a lot of news happening. Of course, we're still in a boom. There's a lot of news in transferring all those big companies and how the contracts are being changed to fanatics overall in the next 10, 20 years. If we say this is kind of like the boom era, is this next 20 years all going to be a boom era, or is there going to be dying down? Is the industry still going to be this passionate in 20 years? Is there going to be overproduction? What's your prediction on the next few centuries?
Let me put it this way, Ben. What's going to happen over the next couple of decades is going to be, yeah, it won't be centuries. I won't be around to see that. But in the next couple of decades, I think the most important people that'll determine the direction of sports cards and trading cards themselves is people like yourself, Ben. People like that listen to your podcast. Because without your generation, the hobby will not continue to grow. And that's one of the biggest things that I would like to see in terms of the hobby. Continue to mentor people like yourself, get them educated, get them to appreciate the sports card market. Collect what you like first of all. Get the kids to continue to collect what they like, and it'll be your generation that will determine the next 10 to 20 years as to how the sport market plays out. Because without you to continue to collect, we've got nothing. I've always said this about anything, and this can be applied to other hobbies as well. We need to continue to get the younger generation interested, because if we don't get the generation interested, then the hobby will die off. Now, I can't tell you whether there's going to be a boom. I can't tell you if there's going to be overproduction. Again, you guys will be the next generation of consumers when you become adults, and you'll be passing this knowledge back on to your kids, and so forth and so forth. So you need to have that continual growth from generation to next generation to next generation, because without you guys, the hobby means nothing. Now, I know you mentioned Fanatics. Fanatics is an interesting deal because they're acquiring all the major league sports licenses. Right now, they've acquired the MLB, They've got the NBA. No, is it NBA or NFL? Sorry, I can't remember which. One of the two, as well as the players' associated properties as well. And now Fanatics also hinted that they're going to get into grading as well. Now that's a lot for one company to control, but again, how that plays out depends on your generation when you guys become adults. How you play it out with Fanatics. Right now, the jury's still out on Fanatics. It's still too early. Um, I don't know how it's going to play out because all the other guys have until 2026. That'll be the last year that they can print cards. And once 2026 is over, Fanatics takes over. Now, a lot of concern that's out there about Fanatics is one, they've never dealt with cards ever. Because right now, if you look at Fanatics' site, what they do is they'll buy cards of other cards that are made by other sports manufacturers, and they'll reslab it in a Fanatics holder, and then they resell it. Is that a good indication of what Fanatics is? I don't know. Like Fanatics does have had in the past couple of years, they had their own um, sets that were made by either Panini or some other card company and sold as a Fanatics exclusive. Um, so they've had that kind of you know touch in the sports card market. But now to take over all these properties and start making cards themselves, uh, it's a pretty big task. And I will tell you, a lot of my generation right now will hold them to task if they come out with a real terrible product, and or if the prices are jacked. Um, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2026, 2027.
I mean, we talked about how the monopoly of individual sports kind of ruined the industry back in the 2000s, and now it's an even bigger monopoly with one company literally controlling everything. Do you think there's even a chance that Fanatics might never even produce a physical card and do all digital cards or NFT cards?
There is that question, of course. Yeah, there's also the introduction of NFT, which we can go into that a little bit later. But NBA Top Shot is one, for example, which is based out of Vancouver, BC. But in terms of NFTs and digital cards, like Topps and Panini already do digital cards. You know, they could potentially go digital, but I can tell you this though, if they go digital and no physical trading card, you're going to take away a lot of the collecting base that is my generation because they will not be interested in digital. A certain amount might be interested in digital, but for me, I always prefer the physical form. Now, will they do some type of digital card where you can actually pull that digital card and they'll make it a physical card? That's a question to be asked. I don't know. Um, I honestly don't know what Fanatics' plans are in terms of that field or area. I really hope they don't focus too much on the digital or NFT side of it, although NFT is gaining a lot of traction these days. But for the traditionalists, we prefer the physical card.
I guess we'll label this category all investments, right? Things that are the things that are assets that are like sports cards or comic books or NFTs, anything that has value that's kind of a culture icon. What's your take on this whole industry with not just comic books, but or not just sports cards, but do you think there's going to be a boom with comic books? What's your take on NFTs?
That's two different questions. So I'll talk about pop culture in itself. I don't think pop culture will ever go away. Pop culture is in all of us, whether you be a young child and you become an adult, because what you grew up with as a young child and then you become an adult will always be looked at as pop culture. So, one of the things about our show is we've had many different collectors. We've had stamp coin collectors, um, and we talk about the collectability of those. We hope to have one day a comic book collector on our show, but just those are just examples. Will those ever go away? No, because it's all about rarity. So as you get older as an adult, what is rare to you? What is nostalgic to you? So for us, like comic books, like I think there's been some recent sales and they're like astronomical now. Like the first Superman or the first Spider-Man, for example. especially in pristine condition. Because as you continue to become an adult, um, depending on how much you save or how much money you make as an adult, the whole nostalgia aspect will never go away because you're always looking for that rare copy of something, whether it be a trading card, a comic book, a coin, a stamp. It could be a bottle cap. Heck, it could be even old advertising pieces or old movie posters. Those will never go away. So in terms of rarity, it's always driven by rarity. So one of the things I always say, and my partner Amit will tell you this. I've always told him, and he's realizing it now, that your collection should always be about quality and not um, about quantity. It should always be about quality, 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 quality. Don't get wrapped up into quantity. Collect the really good pieces when you can afford it. And I stress that when you can afford it. Do not go out of your way to spend money you don't have or borrow to get something. When you have the ability to afford it, get the things you like. Okay. Now, in terms of the NFT aspect of it, NFT was fairly new. It was kind of brought out mainly by NBA Top Shot, which is an NFT company based in Vancouver, BC. Uh, and what they did was they created these rare video moments. And if you got in early during the time when they're releasing all these rare NBA video moments, you would have made a lot of money. And there were certain individuals, and I think there's some social influencers that made a lot of money with that. I didn't jump on board with it because I was very skeptical about this whole NFT universe about owning a video clip that I could probably watch on YouTube for free. It didn't make any sense to me. Why would I want to own a video clip that I can watch anywhere else on a highlight reel somewhere else? But they made it NFT rare video clips, and then they started their own little inside marketplace where you could change or exchange or trade or buy rare clips. And to me, to this day, and I'm sorry, I'm not a huge NFT person right now, but to this day, I just don't understand the whole concept of owning a rare video clip. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me, but it makes sense to other people. So I'm not going to knock people that do collect NFTs of like NBA Top Shot, or now you have these artists that are doing NFTs as well for some of their artwork and stuff like that. I mean, it's cool. I mean, it means you own it. Nobody else can own it. It's a piece of something that's in the cloud. I mean, okay, that doesn't personally appeal to me, but for those that are game, go for it. Because for me, I'm always about ingenuity and I'm always about new things. So I don't want to knock NFTs per se, but for me as an NFT collector, I have dabbled in NBA Top Shot just out of transparency. I have not made a killing, but I have dabbled in NBA Top Shot just to see what it was like, what it was about. But if that's kind of your angle and it kind of works for you, then go for it. But again, NFT is just like trading cards; it's not for everybody. Like you have to find your own niche, whether it be digital, physical. It can be not just about sports. Like I said, if you're a big old video game collector, like there's some video games out there that are like worth a lot of money, especially new in box or ever unplayed. I mean, there's a huge market for those. I know video games can get graded, comic books get graded, coins, stamps get graded. In this wonderful world of ours, there isn't anything that you can't say that you could be passionate about hobby wise. There's always something. If you have the love or passion for something, there's always something out there for you to collect.
On that note, when I first got into the whole sports card world, of course, you gravitate towards the super high $4.3 million Mahomes rookie RPA, all those big top dollar cards. And like I would talk to my parents, and my dad would be like, "Why would someone pay $4.3 million for just a piece of cardboard, basically?" Or like, yeah, or like with comic books, that is like what $2.3 million Spider-Man one, high grade. So, what do you respond to that? Why would someone pay? This is $30, but why would someone pay hypothetically $1 million for just a slab made of plastic and a piece of cardboard?
It goes back to what I alluded to earlier, Ben. It's all about rarity. How many copies of there are of that particular Spider-Man number one in that condition? Not many. How many copies of that one particular coin that has that particular value or rare printing of it out there? Not many. And what I'm trying to drive at is we're all talking about graded cards or graded things or graded collectibles, and the one thing they have all in common is the registry. How many of them are actually graded in that condition? I can tell you that's not many, and it goes for any collectible. And that's what drives these investors. I'd say it's 50% investor, 50% I have money, and that brings back nostalgia, and I want that particular thing in my collection. So I'm gonna, because I can afford it, I will fork out the money to get it. But again, it all boils down to is rarity. It's all about the rarity. It's all about saying that I have that one, T206 Onus Wagner, and nobody else can lay claim to it because I have one of the three, right? That's a pretty pristine thing to say.
It's playing on like ego, like saying like it's playing a little bit on that kind of reputation, kind of, but like if you have an original Mona Lisa painting, I don't know if that's a thing, but have like a Mona Lisa painting, and it's like, here is my Mona Lisa. Is it kind of playing on the like kind of human ego or want to impress people?
Um, you know what, Ben? I would say partially yes, but again, we can't read into what people's personalities are unless you can read minds. But what is the driver for that particular individual to buy like a Banksy, for example? They're already re-auctioning the Banksy, the girl with the balloon that was half shredded, right? But somebody's gonna fork out all of that $1 million or whatever to buy it because they can say that I have the half shredded Banksy painting of the girl in the balloon because there's only one. There's no other one. So, is it ego? Maybe a little bit, but again, for me, in terms of quality, if there's something that I see that isn't a whole lot of, then it's something that I like, then I will, and I can afford it, then I will buy it. A perfect example is I'll show you, Ben. And for those on the podcast, I'll tell you what it is because you won't be able to see it. Um, where is it here? So this Mike Trout, this Mike Trout. So this is a Mike Trout autograph out of 15. Okay, this came out of the 2016 Topps Transcendent set, and Mike Trout has a lot of autographs out there. Why did I buy this particular one? Two things. One, it's numbered out of 15, so it's low, so there's a low print run. Two, it's one of his nicer autographs because his more modern day autographs now are just like an MT. This is like a more full autograph. And third, for me, this is from the 1985 retro set. So 1985, you see the design in there. That's the 1985 design on that card, and that's from my youthful days of collecting. So that has nostalgia there. So it brings me back to those days of, oh, I remember this set when they came out with that border and that design. So that was one of the main reasons why I bought that card, right? So when it goes to collectability, it's all about rarity. Can I afford it? Yes, I can afford it. Can I actually maybe a little bit ego say, hey, I only have the one Banksy with the girl in the balloon? Yeah. But again, when it comes to a particular person, unless you really know them, you really won't know what was their motivation to get that particular piece. Was it more about ego? Was it because I have the money, or just for example, I just love Banksy? I don't know. And a lot of these times, a lot of these people that have like I'll say large pockets, they stay kind of anonymous anyway because they've hired some other bidder out there to bid for them and win it for them, and they remain anonymous. So a lot of times you don't even know who it is. So it's hard to figure out what is their driver is to want a particular piece.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know you, a big part of why you do it is the passion, right? The nostalgia, the drive that you had years ago, and kind of having that back now. I mean, for me, honestly, it's that collectible part. Like I used to collect Funko Pops, the bobbleheads, stamps, and also now kind of like a collectible. I mean, being able to have I'm trying to go into comic books too and have like these underwall, all these like slabs that just kind of as a decorative piece even. Um,
Well, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because when I was a kid, your age, my bedroom wall, and it was not a good thing to do, by the way. So my bedroom wall was taped up with all these comic books in comic book bags. Not a good thing to do. Don't do that. But that's what I did because it was like, oh, my favorite covers are on the wall.
now like it's like except it's with slabs now, like in a nice slab. It's one, of course, looking at the prospect of at least with comic books, first appearances, is this comic book that I'm gonna want in 5 years? Is it at a good price right now? And then also just that decoration piece. Friends come over after seeing the movie, and it's like, wait, you have the Shang-Chi one in a high, just that kind of cool aspect.
Makes great conversation pieces for sure. Absolutely.
I guess during this boom, you and a partner of yours decided to start a podcast. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so my good buddy Amit Acharya, we've been, I guess we've known each other for almost 20 some odd years, but we've been setting up at the Sport Card Expo, which is the equivalent of the National in the United States, in Canada here in Toronto for I'd say over a dozen years now, if not longer. And the funny thing is, we met each other at a local hobby shop that was doing a hockey box break. That's how we met each other. And then we got to really know each other, and we found out that we share the same passion when it comes to sports and card collecting, and it's similar interests, right? So a good friend of ours, Jeremy Lee, who has his own podcast, Sports Card Live, he started his podcast, and he really delves into the whole sports card world and the collectability and all things all the happenings that happen in the sports card world. So we saw him do his show, and for me and I, we talked about doing something, and then we kind of let it slide a little bit, and then we talked about it again, then let it slide a little bit. But then, interestingly enough, with the pandemic that happened, again, it kind of leads you to, oh, I have time on my hands. What do I do? Let's talk about this. And then we decided, should we delve into the podcast world? And we did do that this past February. In fact, this Tuesday, tomorrow will be episode number 37 for us. Um, you know, we kind of touch upon the sports card collecting world a little bit, but we didn't want to be another one of those shows. And there's a lot of them on YouTube. You can just do a search that talk about the sports card world and rant about it. We didn't want to be a rant show. No offense to the ones who enjoy doing rant shows. Um, we didn't want to be another one of those talking about the bad aspects of it, the downside of this, or anything that happens within the sports car world and everybody freaks out. We didn't want to be one of those shows. We want to be more of a diverse show. Um, you know, the biggest thing about our show is all about diversity, inclusivity, and sometimes we dive into subjects that that matters, subject matters that others won't. Um, our show is all about our guests and their collective journeys, in the collecting what they love, really. And to be honest, showcasing genuine people in their respective hobbies is key for us. And if you've had a chance to see our show, which is Cardboard Culture on YouTube, um, you'll see the diverse guests we've had. We've had all kinds of diverse guests on our show, men, women. Hopefully, we can get more young folks on our show. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're a collector, let me know because we'd love to have you on our show because we want to get more young people involved in our show as well. Because for our show, it's all about diversity. So we've had guests on from Australia. We've had a person from Czechoslovakia. Um, we've talked about certain things that are key, like for example, in Canada, Indigenous rights. So one of our friends and collectors, he's Indigenous. He collects Indigenous rookie cards. We've had him on our show. Um, we we're very we're all about positivity, and that's what the main prospect of our show is: to be inclusive and to bring on people that are passionate and positive influences. And if these people that we bring on can inspire others to get into that particular collecting genre, then we've done our part because we want to showcase the fact that it's not always about the negativity. It's all about positivity. Because, for example, Ben, you're a perfect example of this. You have your own podcast that we're on right now, and you have featured many, many guests that are all very positive and have influence in terms of young entrepreneurs. So for our show, we want to focus on that too, the positivity that these passionate collectors can bring out in somebody, and that's what we're looking for our show. We've always, we don't always go mainstream and pick the most obvious people to be guests on our show. We want those that are just downright genuine, good, honest people, and they're passionate and they're willing to give advice and teach people the right ways to collect a particular hobby, whatever it happens to be. And that's what we want. That's our focus, really.
Yeah, I love that aspect of it. And I did watch one show recently that was it was a break with your partner. I think was breaking a few soccer that day. But yeah, I love that aspect of diversity in the sports card world because it's and especially using positivity and touching on subjects that are not just unique to sports cards, but like real life things in relation to sports cards in that world is super important. In all your time through sports cards, all the way back to the 80s until now, and even from your life, and noticing trends that happened during the sports card world in your life, what's been the biggest lesson that you've learned that you want to communicate to our listeners now?
I would say to your listeners, collect what you like, be passionate about your favorite sports team, whether it be any of the four major sports, and it doesn't have to necessarily be any of the major four sports. I want to talk about this aspect is that um, there are a lot of female and girl collectors out there, and they don't get enough appreciation. I would say we know that they're out there, uh, and they love like soccer or tennis or whatever happens to be. So even for the female listeners, be passionate about the sports that you love, and if there's cards, if you want to collect into it, collect it. um, you know Again, it's all about collecting what you like and collecting within your means. And what I mean by your means is what you can afford. Don't go crazy on trying to keep the old saying, keeping up with the Joneses. Don't do that. Just do what you like and do what you're passionate about when it comes to collecting. That is my best advice that I can give to anybody. Um, you know, start off small. Don't go crazy about quantity. Just start doing quality. Quality will always outlast quantity. Because one of the biggest life lessons for me when I got really into the just prior to the junk wax area was I wanted to collect everything. So I was collecting NBA, MLB, NHL, NFL. And when you're a young collector, if you don't have deep pockets and your mom and dad's not going to give you your allowance to buy those cards, you can't afford all four sports. That is one of the biggest lessons I learned. You need to focus on one sport, maybe two. Don't go crazy and try and collect every sport, because unless you have deep pockets, you're going to realize you don't have a lot of funds. And then you're going to get into all kinds of sorts of trouble. Because one of the things I try to tell people is that it's not always about quantity. And the reason why I say it's not always about quantity, it's always about quality. Because when you end up with a lot of quantity and the quantity is not of any particular quality, you're going to be sitting on tons of cards that you cannot flip, as they like to use the word nowadays. So then that's realized investment that you cannot make your money back from, and you would have to sit. You either have to sit on the inventory or take a loss. And I don't want anybody doing that. Just stick to one or two major sports, or one or two, maybe three favorite players, even if you're a player collector, and then go from there. Don't go crazy trying to collect everybody and everything. It's not possible. Um, and you're just going to find yourself drowning because you can't keep up with everybody else. And another thing too is don't go don't fall into the hype that, I hate to say it, but certain social influencers saying, "Oh, you should get this or you should get that." Do your own research. Ask people that you know that are in the collecting world for their advice, because anybody that, including myself and my partner, meet, we will give you sound advice on what to do. Because I find that some people shy away from asking. There's no harm in asking somebody who collects, because they'll give you, hopefully, they will give you good advice on how to not get too wrapped up with too much stuff. Because the worst thing is, like I said earlier, if you have too much stuff, it's going to be really, really hard to move or try to get your realized investment on return back.
I love it. So invest in what you like. Um, be passionate about it. Don't don't try to buy everything. Focus on the quality of what you buy and make sure you can afford it in the first place. I love all of it.
And I'll end with this last thing. Yeah, be passionate. And when I say be passionate, don't be passionate because Ben is collecting this particular person. You need to be passionate about what you like and what not what somebody else likes. Okay.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Ken, for coming on the show today. It's great having you.
Welcome, Ben. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.